everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome. My name is Jessica, also known as Chicprofessor on Instagram, and I make videos on luxury goods, sustainable fashion, and workwear. Welcome back to the Sustainable Fashion 101 series. Today's topic is a debate. It is a debate in the sustainable fashion world, and it is about leathers. And I'm talking about real leather versus faux leather, vegan leather, imitation leather. We have a ton of different words for things that are meant to look like leather, but are not in fact leather. And both have their pros and cons in terms of sustainability and ethics. So I want to break those arguments down with you all today. I will definitely leave some links for further information, as I'll just be going over the basics in the description box below, so definitely check that out. And also feel free to weigh in on the comments on your thoughts on this topic. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so with this topic, I am not gonna say there's like a definite better choice or answer. I think that is up to each person individually to decide, but I do wanna give you the basics of the information. So to start with, leather, real leather, is not the most ethical thing that exists by any means. There are a lot of issues with real leather in terms of animal wellness, the way we treat different animals, and even just the production of leather and the environmental concerns of that. So environmentally and ethically, there are definitely concerns there. Faux leather comes in to try to appease the ethical concerns, but environmentally, it is not really much better. There are a few different types of faux leather that we have, and most of the time when we're saying faux leather or vegan leather, we're talking about plastic. We're talking about different kinds of materials that are made out of different kinds of plastics, basically, and the issues with that. So the most well-known type of like pleather, vegan leather, whatever that's going to be, is plastic made from PVCs, and PVCs are basically the worst. They're the worst in terms of toxins, the toxic chemicals that are used for that. They are definitely like petroleum leaches out of it over time, so it's just a real terrible fabric. And it's pretty cheap to make, so that's why it's used a lot of times, but environmentally it is terrible. So PVCs are pretty much the worst. Polyurethane, well, a lot of people will be like, oh, we're PVC free faux leather. And a lot of times they're still plastic and they're polyurethane. Polyurethanes are much better than PVCs, but still terrible, just not as terrible. PVCs are like a microfiber based synthetic, but creating those is really chemically intensive. So you use a ton of chemicals to actually just kind of create this material. So although the chemicals are not as toxic or as terrible, it's not as bad for the environment, polyurethane really prides itself on that, people that use polyurethane, but polyurethane has a shorter shelf life than PVC. It does not last as long, and neither of them last anywhere near as long as leather does. So again, there's sort of this ethical conundrum with you're creating plastic that has nowhere to go, and it doesn't even last that long. So the waste can be much larger with polyurethane than PVCs, even though the chemicals are a little bit less. So that leads nicely into the biodegradability debate. So of course, plastic doesn't biodegrade. I mean, it does, I guess, sometimes, depending on the chemicals that are used. There are some that biodegrade after like thousands of years, but in general, they are not natural, and so they don't biodegrade. So of course, right, again, you're creating this waste that doesn't last that long. You're making plastic and then using it. Some people will use recycled plastic. Certainly that helps get it out of the cycle for a little while, but again, it will still turn to waste, and you have to use so many chemicals to make it work that is it worth it? So a lot of people will say that leather, on the other hand, is a natural source. It will decompose and biodegrade because it is made from animals. And Stella McCartney actually has a really great quote where she basically says that's total rubbish. And it's rubbish because, yeah, if we had just like dead animals hanging in our closet, they would biodegrade and decompose. But because there are so many chemicals that go into making leather what it is and the way we use it in a handbag, that makes it so it's almost impossible for that to decompose because of the leathers and all the different materials that we use to kind of bond things together and that sort of thing. So the biodegradability debate, a lot of it is kind of none of them are great for that, or none of the typical things that we think of as faux leather and leather. So then we get into the byproduct debate. So we talked about the end of the life cycle, right? The decomposition and biodegradability, but to talk about the beginning of the life cycle and the creation, the production. But the byproduct debate is one that a lot of people really like to stand by. It's one that I certainly thought made sense for a long time. And it's basically the thought that cattle are already grown for their meat, raised, I should say, for their meat. And meat consumption is so big that when they're getting the meat, there's leftover skin, so it might as well go to be leather, right? It already exists. Instead of being something that's created, it's already created for another purpose, and we're just using this byproduct of the meat industry. And the meat industry, there's no doubt the meat industry is incredibly harmful environmentally. Something like 18% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from the meat industry, and specifically the cattle industry. So that for sure exists, and there is quite a lot of meat out there, so therefore would be quite a lot of leather out there. But of course, that argument no longer works if you're talking about calf skin or lamb skin or goat skin, these other skins that are not used for the mature cattle meat industry. So there's definitely some more implications with that. So there are a lot of people who claim sustainable leather, and one of the reasons they say that is that the cows were raised ethically and then it is just a byproduct. That is, of course, sort of a small population of the leather that's actually created. And then regardless, you can't say that the production doesn't have a lot of chemicals, because the tanning process, the tanning of the hide, is using a lot of terrible toxic chemicals. Now, those who say sustainability will say that they have vegetable tanned leather. That's something that Stella McCartney says, rather than, I forgot the metal that they use to tan, like silver tanning or something, is incredibly toxic, but the vegetable tanned leather is less toxic. So a lot of people, again, will use vegetable tanned leather grown in a sustainable way as a byproduct and claim that to be sustainable leather. The other thing with going back to sort of the end of the production cycle is leather, once it is made, if it's made in and tanned in a way that is more ethically done, then most of the time that leather can be used again for something else after it's lived its purpose. So a lot of people do like the aged leather look, and a leather that's taken care of can last for decades. So it certainly has a longer shelf life. But then potentially, if it's created in a good way, right, it can be used again for other things. Of course, faux leather doesn't have that option. Most faux leather cannot be made into something else later on because of the chemicals and because of the plastic and kind of what's used for that. So those are kind of the big debates when it comes to things. A lot of people will say, well, for sure, faux leather is certainly the more ethical way to go, and if it's produced with less chemicals, then that's great. But if it doesn't last as long, and if it can't continue to be reused, if people don't take care of it as much because it's not as much of an investment, what does that mean, right? So it's definitely this big debate. And the last thing that I want to quickly talk about with you all are some new technologies that are coming out in the faux leather world. The real leather world, they are working on maybe the tanning process, but otherwise that kind of is what it is. But in the faux leather world, there are a lot of new things coming out that are not plastic. So some of the new technologies that are coming out, some are already available, but most of them are still in the works, are Pinatex. That's a really big one. So making leather-like material out of pineapple skin, I believe specifically. Same thing with apples. I think it's called a peel. Apples are also something that people are making leather out of. Also mushrooms, right? So all of these kind of plant-based, food-based items can be potentially made into leather. There's also some lab-grown leather. So taking some, I don't know the science behind it enough, but taking some part of an animal, part of leather, some probably like stem cells or something, and then creating leather from that, growing just for the leather. So not raising an animal to slaughter it, but just growing the leather itself. And so it still has the properties of leather, but it can be made in a way that can use less chemicals in the actual process of creating what you need, and of course be much more ethical. So there are some really interesting things coming out. And if you ask me where I stand, I cannot deny that I like leather goods. That is a large part of the sort of luxury game and finding beautiful leather. I do appreciate the longevity of leather. I also appreciate buying leather secondhand and vintage, right? So leather that already exists, giving it new life, giving it new purpose. But I am interested in some of the new technologies that come out. I'm really not interested in adding any more plastic to my life. So in terms of what we think of generally as faux leather, that's not for me. But some of these new technologies are really interesting to me and something that I would like to try out in the future. So I'm definitely looking into those. And I will leave some links to some of this information down below so that you can explore it more. But I do want to know in the comments, what are your thoughts? Did you learn something new? First of all, let me know if this has been helpful. And then second, where do you stand? Are you pro leather, pro faux leather? Where do you stand in the debate? I'm thinking for the rest of the series, I'm going to continue on with materials for right now. So this is the only one that has like a real debate. The other ones, I'm just going to give you information about different materials and I'll kind of group them together somehow. Then I'm going to do kind of the miscellaneous material. And then I'm going to end with brands. A lot of you want to know different brands, how I decide where to shop, what to shop, which brands to use, and then which brands I like. And I will talk about brands whose main mission is sustainability. And then I'm also going to talk about luxury brands. So I'm going to break down a ton of the big luxury fashion houses and just do a dedicated video to each on, are they sustainable or not? What about them is, maybe what are they working towards, that sort of thing. So I'm excited to kind of dig into each of those brands. If you have specific ones you want me to cover, please let me know those down below. So that is my plan. I thank you all so very much for joining me. I hope that you found some interesting information out and that you enjoyed. And please do leave those comments down below. I look forward to seeing you in the rest of the series and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.